On the other side of a storm is the strength that comes from navigating through it. Raise your sail and begin. Just because you're struggling doesn't mean that you're failing. I think sometimes people equate struggling with failure. It's not. It isn't even close. In fact, if you're struggling, it tells me that you're still in the game. We don't see these incredible opportunities first because every opportunity that you and I have is surrounded by a problem. I've never gone to an opportunity that I didn't have to go to the door of problems first. So the next time you have an obstacle, a difficulty, an adversity in your life, don't allow the crisis to numb you. Be alive, learn, feel, fail, learn. That's what it's all about if you want to make this difficult time a good time. I just want you to know that there's a hero within you. I know there is. And during this tough time, let the hero out. Let people see the best of you, your highest aspirations. You be the one who's the lifter and the encourager.
Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Mark Cole. I have been with John Maxwell now 20 years, and I've watched him in the last 20 years do what he's done in 53 years of this leadership message he's been proclaiming. He pivots, and he pivots again. Any leaders out there leading understand what I mean when I say John Maxwell and leaders pivot? You're looking at a screen today, and not only am I joined by John Maxwell, who has been doing this program for some time, I'm joined by a leader that he respects, a guy that really needs no introduction, but Simon Sinek is a man with a mission, a man with a message, and a man that wants to add value to you today. So I'm going to get out of the way, but let me explain what's going to happen. You are a part of the Leadership When It Matters the Most program. John pivoted 9 weeks ago when we couldn't do a live event and has spoken to over 2.2 million people on this program in the last 8 weeks. Well, we've pivoted again because John's felt like his message has been said, and now it's time to introduce you to some friends of him and their message in these difficult times. Let me explain difficult times. We've had the COVID-19 health crisis. We're having the COVID-19 financial crisis. And now we're having the George Floyd crisis. We are becoming acclimated to crisis. And so the program is about you. I've got some pre-submitted questions that we're going to throw over to John and Simon. And then in this program, I really want to challenge you. Go to the chat box and post your question. And let us select your question to ask of John and Simon. John, Simon, thank you. John, I'm going to get out of the way and let you welcome your friend. And then I do have some questions for you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Simon, good to have you, buddy.
It's so good to see you.
Love every time I'm with you, whether we're on stage or in the green room or out having dinner. You are a leader's leader. You are a thinker. You are a practitioner. You add value to me. You add value to everybody. You walk into our lives and you make us better. That's what leaders do. So Simon, having you on with us today, beautiful. And you are the guest. So what I mean by that is I've shared with Mark, I've said, Mark, we feature you. I mean, I'll come around and pick up a few pieces once in a while too. Be glad to. But you're the man. You're the man. And I want to make sure that your message and your thoughts are given to the people. So thanks for coming and being with us. Sure love you, man.
Thanks, John.
Go ahead, Mark.
The feeling's mutual. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and before the program is over, we're going to give you some additional ways to get more impact and value from Simon and his team. So stay tuned for that. Guys, I'm going to ask both of you this question. Simon, first to you. But you guys have spent your life, at whatever level and length that is, you've spent your life really for your platform and your message. Simon, for you, that message is you've got to start with why, and you've got to be in the infinite game. As you are seeing yourself and others deal with crisis after crisis after crisis in this current time, what about your message is digging deeper into yourself? And what are you learning that further accents the way that we can apply your message in difficult times?
So crisis is the great revealer. When a crisis hits, everything that may have been hidden or hard to see becomes easy to see. Everything from how we operate, how we deal with stress, the quality of our relationships, the quality of our corporate culture, the quality, I mean, everything is revealed instantaneously. We can't judge the quality of a crew by how a ship performs in calm waters. We judge the quality of a crew by how a ship performs in rough waters. And the thing that I found comforting, quite frankly, is that because my work is about building strong foundations. The concept of why is a foundation of a house. That if a hurricane comes through and does damage to the house, the foundation is fixed. When we dig up ancient ruins, we find the foundations. That's what we find. And so what I've learned is that in a time where we need to respond to crisis, you go back to basics. You go back to the foundation, that I can change what I do. I can change how I bring my message to the world. I can change the product that I'm selling. All of that is flexible. But the thing that has remained completely fixed that I've been able to pivot around is my why, is my cause. And so when COVID happens, for example, we make most of our income from live events, and that disappeared. And so we didn't go back to the team and said, how are we going to do more live events, but online? We didn't just take the old business model and try and shove it online. We said, okay, imagine that the old business never existed. We have this cause to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. We have this vision of the world that we imagine to build a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do. That we have all these resources, we have all of this content. What are we going to do with it? And we literally built an entirely new business. But the foundation, the most important thing to answer your question, is the foundation never changed. So what I found incredibly comforting is I've gone back to my own work and used that as the basis to provide some kind of stability in all the work and all the change that's happening around us.
So John, I know you may want to even bounce off of that, but I want to ask you the same question. You've made your life about the statement, everything rises and falls on leadership. And yet we're seeing in media today, we're seeing in COVID-19, we're seeing in the national response to George Floyd, we're seeing leadership in some form or fashion. What are you finding out about leadership and its importance in today's realities?
Well, I want to play off what Simon just said about the crisis being the great revealer. I agree completely with that. And one of the things that crisis reveals is the players from the pretenders. When it comes to leadership, again, a pretender can hide in normal times. They can hide behind their titles, their positions, the political aspect of what they're doing as a leader. So during easy times, you can hide. But when it comes to crisis, it squeezes out of every one of us who we really are. And here's what I mean by the difference between a player and a pretender as far as the leader is concerned. For example, players immediately go to where the needs of the people are. Pretenders, they have a tendency to always make sure that they look right. They look good. Pretenders are all about how am I positioned, and players are all about where are the people. Because wherever the people are, that's the people that we have to lead. You have to find them before you can lead them. And so I think you begin to find out the pretenders have an agenda during a crisis, and the agenda is how can I look good on this? Where the players, they just say, where are the people, and how can I serve you, and how can I add value to you? And it's all hands on deck. And yes, we've had to let go of everything we've basically done, but it's okay. The players want the ball during a crisis. And the pretenders, they don't want the ball. They don't want the ball. They want to be on the ball team. They want to, if you think of basketball, they want to be on the side. They want to throw the ball into someone else so that they're seen. But the players want the ball. I remember John Wooden many years ago, we had a discussion. He said, I don't even like to pick my captain of my basketball team until we're 3 or 4 games in, because he said, I want to watch the players play during the tightness of the game. He said, I want to watch which one of my players really wants the ball when there's a minute left and the score's tied. Who wants the ball? Because that should be the captain. So what happens is, in this revealer that, you know, Simon said, which is so true, what happens is the players really shine. They come forth, and the pretenders, they start hiding. In fact, truthfully, all of you that are watching us right now, this is a great time for you to find out who on your team is a player versus who's a pretender. So anyway, where everything rises and falls on leadership, the thing that's discouraging me the most at this time is so many people that have, quote, leadership positions. Their agenda is, honest to God, it's just so wrong. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart, because it's bad enough to manipulate people during good times, but it's compounding worse, manipulating people during difficult times. And so everything rises and falls on leadership, but sadly, a lot of positional leaders we have, they're not really leading well at all right now. That's really, it's revealing, Simon. It's what you just said. It's really revealing right now.
You know, John, you're what I've seen in the marketplace. You're 100% right. Even at a company standpoint, which is the companies that are more successfully pivoting their businesses versus the ones that are really struggling. And the ones that are struggling to pivot have put themselves at the center of the equation. How can we survive? How can we get more money? How can we? It's about us, right? The ones that are more successfully pivoting are the ones that have put the customer at the center of the equation. We've got stuff. How are we going to help them? We've got things that they need. How are we going to get it to them? And though, of course, they need to make money, they've done it with an absolute focus on the outside versus an absolute focus on themselves. So what you're saying is playing out in the marketplace right now.
Yeah, and just one other quick thought then, Mark, we'll go right back to you, buddy. And that is, you also talked about, Simon, about, it's not a revealer, but you talked about the foundation. And to me, values are the foundation. And let me tell you something, my values don't change. My values don't change. Correct. Good times, bad times, they're the same values. People first, correct. Adding value to people. And so what I find in so many of the pretenders is, again, they don't go for where their values are. They go for what, again, is what's convenient for me, what's going to make me look good. Again, you know, as you said it so well, leaders go last. Leaders go last. They serve. And so anyway, you started us off good, Simon. The revealer, foundational stuff, buddy. Hey, that's why you're on here. You're the pro.
Hey, let's go to Ty. He is from Virginia Beach. And Ty, this is back on this leadership. And Simon, we'll go to you first, and then John, you just jump right in. Ty says many of the tensions we're experiencing are because leaders have failed to listen. How can we become better listeners? And secondly, how do we change from just hearing someone's perspective to actually listening to that perspective?
Well, asked and answered. You know, we can make demands of our leaders, but at the end of the day, we can only be responsible for ourselves. Like, we can't change our leaders. When we can vote them in and out, or we can you know, choose to get a different job somewhere, but we can't physically actually change the way that they're going to do business or how they see the world. You know, no number of anonymously sent books is going to solve that problem. But we can change ourselves. And, you know, when I hear people talking about the system is broken, there's no mythical system. It's us. Our society is a collection of individuals, and whatever the balance of behavior is from those individuals is the system you get. And so it starts at home. It starts with us. And so we want to change the system, this elephant. The only way to eat an elephant is one mouthful at a time. And so I think we need to set ourselves on a course to become better listeners ourselves. And there's a difference between listening and hearing. You know, hearing is understanding the words that are said to you. Listening is trying to get to the meaning of the words that are said to you, with an appreciation that sometimes people say the wrong thing. They say what they're trying to say badly. Sometimes emotions are involved. Sometimes they get flustered. And it's not for us to take their words personally, or even to pick apart, but to rather try and show up with curiosity, to really understand the meaning. What I'm describing is empathy. We show up with empathy. That's all this is. And to look past the superficial. I've heard it now, which is, talking about some of the anger. Like if they weren't angry, then we'd probably get more. This would be more productive. Well, do you understand why they're angry? Let's go to the root. That's what listening is. It was Martin Luther King who said, "Riots are the language of the unheard." Remember, we all know what it feels like to feel heard. To feel heard, and to what listening is. It's the practice. It's the practice that another person will feel heard. Just to go off on a quick aside, there's this trend in America today. Everybody's talking about being present. Everybody's mindful. Everybody's doing yoga. Everybody's trying to be present. I attended a meeting where there was a big timey yoga instructor who was sitting next to me. And the entire meeting, she was on her phone and underneath the table. And it wasn't like she had a grandparent in the hospital or something. I could see she was on social media. I was sitting right next to her. And at one point we started talking about being present. And her head popped up and said, "That's why I love yoga. It helps me be present." I mean, I don't think she understands. You are not present. You don't get to decide when you are present. You are present when somebody else says you are.
Wow.
And this is why we practice things like meditation. I mean, for anybody who's ever done a meditation practice, we learn to sit in silence, to focus on one thing, a sound or a mantra. We learn to clear our minds. And if we have a thought, we label a thought, we put it out of our minds. We find this Zen-like state. But that's not for you. You practice yoga, you practice meditation, you practice mindfulness as a service to another human being, so that when you are sitting across a table, that when they are speaking, you have learned to focus on only what they're saying and not if your phone is buzzing or some noise behind you. And if you have a thought, you're not just waiting for your turn to speak, but rather you label it a thought, you put it out of your mind, and you remain focused on what they're saying. And you try to learn and understand the motivation, the emotion underneath. And at the end, you will know you have been present when that person says, "Thank you. I feel heard. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate you being here for me," are the words they will use when you have been present. And so I think the question about listening is we have to go on the journey. It's a skill like any other. It is a learnable, practicable skill. And if you don't practice, you lose that skill. One book I would recommend, it's called How to Talk to Kids So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. It's a bright yellow book. Yes, it's a parenting book. It's one of the best books to teach us to listen to adults as well. But it's a skill, and if you want to learn it, I encourage you to literally go out and learn it and practice and practice and practice.
Simon.
John,
Go ahead.
John, I want you to jump in. Simon, what's the name of that book again?
How to Talk to Kids So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk.
It's a great title. It's more of a paragraph, but still good. Simon, when you talk about listening, in my young leadership years, I was not a good listener at all.
Yeah,
I was so visionary, and I knew so desperately where I wanted to go that it was basically, can I get you on my leadership train? And this is the way we're going. And I was directional. I was motivational. And I said, let's go. And I had a staff member really come into my life one time and just look at me and say, "You don't listen to us." And of course, I protested until I went home to my wife, and I said, "Margaret, Susan says I don't listen to the staff," and she said, "Well, she's right." And then I go, "Oh, I'm in real deep weeds," and so I had to really turn this around. And here's what I discovered about me. Okay, the reason that I didn't listen well is because I valued what I wanted more than I valued what they wanted. And so I had to turn that around. The old Zig Ziglar thing, if you'll help people get what they want, they'll help you get everything you need. Well, what I discovered is, again, I've got to go find them before I could lead them. And so I changed from a directional leader to a conversational leader that basically asked a lot of questions. And so my favorite definition of listening, because it works for me, is listening is wanting to hear. I want to hear. And I love it when you said that the person that validates if you're present isn't yourself. It's like, wow, was I present? Boy,
was I present today? Yeah.
Yeah, they're the ones. And there's not a higher compliment to give to people than to be present and ask questions and value their input and ask for it, that's a high compliment. What's your opinion? What do you think? And what I found is that the great leaders, that they listen, they learn, and then they lead.
And they ask a question and genuinely care about the answer.
Absolutely.
Even if the question is, how are you?
Yeah.
How are you? And genuinely care about the answer.
Yeah, you got it.
A friend of John's, Andy Stanley, did a talk recently about leading in crisis. And he said, every one of you leaders that are leading in times like this, you need to start your meeting with going around asking the question, how are you really? And we did that right after I heard the talk. We did that. An hour later, these leaders that all they want to usually talk about is bottom lines, they was telling about their moms going through this issue, that issue. And it really bound us together, even though it was on a Zoom call, a visual call like this, it really was a connecting point. Hey, Simon, I want to go to you first for the next question. It's from Dominic from St. Louis. And by the way, if you're watching, go to the chat box, list a question. We want to get your question in front of Simon and John Maxwell. This question from Dominic, St. Louis says, what is the best way for a leader to break out of a short-term mindset and embrace a mindset better suited for the infinite game?
Well, the mindset is the infinite mindset. The way to break out of it is to actually sit down and say, what game am I in? Being in the infinite game is not the absence of finite games. It's the context within which the finite games exist. And we use the wrong metaphors and analogies to describe our lives, our businesses. And so most of the metaphors that we use reinforce the finite mindset. We use sports analogies all the time. We use war analogies all the time. This is a campaign. We're launching this, you know. It's fourth and goal, and we have to, you know, this is how we talk to our teams about making, you know, the end of the year numbers or something. And the reality is the analogies are all wrong because these are games that have no finish lines. These are infinite games. And so we have to change our mentality of how it's playing. And I like to think of it more like lifestyle. So for example, like being healthy, you can absolutely have finite goals. I want to lose X amount of weight by X date. It's a finite number. I mean, it's an arbitrary number and an arbitrary date, just like we said, arbitrary financial goals for arbitrary dates. Same thing, right? Sales goals, all of it's all arbitrary, right? And we like numbers. Metrics are really important. It helps people feel like they're making progress. You could never run a marathon without mile markers because it's unnerving. And we have to remember metrics are there to help us understand speed and distance, but they don't indicate the end of the game. It's speed and distance. And so it's wonderful. And we weigh ourselves every day and we're exercising, we're eating right, and we can see the weight come off. And if we hit our goal, we feel excited. And here's the worst part. You have to keep exercising and eating healthy for the rest of your life because the game does not end. Congratulations, you hit your goal. Now you have to keep going and going and going. It's a different mind frame, different mindset. Also, what happens if you miss your goal? You know what happens if you miss your goal? Nothing. Nothing happens if you miss your goal. It was arbitrary. But if you've been eating healthy and exercising, the odds are you'll hit that goal in a month or so. You're fine. In fact, you're probably way healthier now than when you started because the metrics were there. The finite game is there to help you make progress in the infinite game. That's the role of the finite game. That's the role of many of those finite games. The infinite game is the context within which those finite games exist. But if we don't have vision, if we don't have a cause, if we don't have a place that we're trying to go to, then the only thing we have are the finite things. The only thing we have are those finite metrics. And that's why we become so obsessed with them, because that's all we've got. Wow. That's all we've got. And so you want to have that distant view of a more idealized state of the world, which is different than a BHAG, different than a big, hairy, audacious goal. This is not achievable in 25 years. This is not achievable in your lifetime. All men are created equal. 240 years, still not there, right? But all of the milestones that we pass, we're trying to get there, and all of them are imperfect. But you can see a nation struggling to get somewhere. It's the same at a micro level. To have a vision of service, to have a vision of a world, the way John talks about his business, the way John talks about his work, and all of the things he's doing are the micro games, the finite games that help him measure progress towards this grander thing. And by the way, that is what gives our lives and our work meaning. That the finite metrics actually are adding up towards something bigger.
Oh, that's good stuff. Can I pitch for? Can I? Everybody, if you're on, you've got to get Simon's book, The Infinite Game. I'm telling you, you got to get it. and the reason you have to get it is I've read every one of your books, Simon. Okay.
Thank you, John.
I truly think this is, to me, now every book speaks to you based on where you are. So when somebody says it's a great book, it became great because that what was said in that book is coming right up to where I am personally. The Infinite Game was incredible because when I started off, I was goal oriented. And so I laid out my goals. In fact, my first personal growth kit was goals and how to set goals. And so I did. And it was kind of like, how long will it take? How long will it take? How long will it take? And one day in my personal growth, because of the changes happening in me, I went from how long will it take to how far can I go? And that was my first introduction to the Infinite Game. All of a sudden, I realized, oh my. And then I began to understand there really is no finish line. That the metrics are finishing are not finishing lines. They're indicators of how far you've gone. But if you have a finish line, if you play a finite game and that's all you have, you don't have the bigger infinite game. The problem is when you cross the finish line, as you know, Simon, you're finished. I mean, it's over. And how many times do we see people? They've already died. They just haven't made it official. You know what I'm talking about? I mean,
you see this in companies, right? We want to be the biggest. We want to be number one. So what happens if you achieve that? Do you shut the doors? You've accomplished your goal. Shut the doors. The game is over.
That's exactly right.
So true.
Hey, John, I want to hear.
You want to get that book. Make sure they get the book, Mark.
Thank you, John.
They want to get it.
Absolutely. So, John, I want to go to you with this next question, but Simon, I would love to hear you speak into it as well. It's Tim from Creedmoor, North Carolina. He said, with so much pain and distrust and tension in our society right now, how do we navigate long-lasting transformational change? John?
Well, a couple of things. It's a great question. Let's talk about trust. Let's just talk about trust. In fact, I think there are three questions that all followers ask of a leader. And the three questions are, do you like me? Can you help me? And can I trust you? And I think those are three very valid questions. I mean, who wants to follow a leader that doesn't like them? Because the first thing they'll do is they'll manipulate you and move you for their advantage. Who wants to follow a leader that's incompetent? Hello, you're not going to get where you want to go with that. But this issue of trust, and so what I say to myself all the time is, that's not the question followers should be asking me. That's the question I should be asking myself. It goes back to what Simon was saying again. When the, quote, system is broken, we're the system. Hey, wait a minute. Quit looking for someone else to bail us out, lead us up. Let's look at ourselves and say, what am I doing? How do I get involved? How do I improve myself? How do I get better? So every day I'm asking myself that question. Do I really love the people that I lead? Because honestly, if I don't love them, I ought to get out of the leadership game. I mean, is there anything worse than a leader that doesn't love his or her people? I mean, and care for them? So if I'm incompetent, I ought to get out of the leadership game, or that's for sure, or learn how to lead. But this whole issue of trust, am I a trustworthy person? Am I a person? And there's a huge responsibility on trustworthiness. Pat Lencioni has this new book out. I think it's called Motives. And he basically asked, why do leaders lead? And he said there's two reasons. They either lead for reward, in other words, what's in it for me, or they lead for responsibility, which responsibility is heavy. When you sign up for leadership, this is not an easy course. And responsibility means I'm my brother's keeper, and those people are first. And so I think when you talk about something that's long lasting, not a quick fix, those are three questions we just need to ask ourselves, and forget about the followers asking. In fact, let me just say one thing. The moment the follower has to ask the question you're not asking yourself, you're already behind. And so, get out in front and ask the questions first, and set the bar of excellence for yourself before somebody else has to set it for you. Go ahead, Simon.
I like to think of things when people ask societal questions. How do we restore trust? How do we build trust? I always like to think of these things in much smaller, more understandable context. I think of interpersonal relationships, right?
Correct.
How do we build trust with one person? We all know how to do that. Sometimes it's quicker and sometimes it's slower, but it's not immediate. It takes time and it takes reinforcement. And what happens if you violate trust? Like, what happens if you do something that violates the trust of a friend, of somebody who you care about and who cares about you, and they say to you, how can I trust you? And simply doing what you used to do, or simply promising that you can still trust me, I made a mistake. Even if you come clean and say, I made a mistake, there still needs to be, now you got to double down on working even harder. And you got to prove it, and you've got to, and you know, one of the things I can't stand is leaders who say, prove to me why I should trust you. Leaders have to take the risk of trust the day they show up. If you declare yourself a leader, you take the risk of trust. It's the opposite. It's the leaders who have to prove why they're trustworthy to their people.
That's right. Yes.
We get the equation backwards all the time. Leaders take the risk to trust, but the rest of us, you got to earn our trust.
That's why,
Simon,
that's why I love the quote. It's wonderful when the people trust the leader, but it's even more wonderful when the leader trusts the people.
And trust is a risk. It's like love is a risk. Like, you didn't get to choose your children. You love them, right? I didn't get to choose my team. Tough. You got to trust them. Like, you got to love them too.
Yeah.
And if they fail, you don't immediately assume that there's something wrong with them. You go and again, we'll go back to what we said before. You lead with empathy. Are you okay? What's going on? We don't know what their history is. We don't know who their former boss was. We don't know. Maybe they've come from a horrible corporate culture and they've just joined your company and they don't trust anybody. And so they're going to operate to protect themselves. We don't know. And that goes back to those listening skills. I think, just think of it as interpersonal, and how we as individuals would have to act to build trust with another human being, and now amplify that. And you'll see how institutions have to act in a way to rebuild trust with populations as well.
I love that way of communicating and teaching, Simon. It just simplifies everything when you forget about the corporations and the teams, and you just break it down to a one-on-one relationship and say, how's this going to work? And because how it works in one-on-one is how it works with everyone.
Turns out organizations and societies are just collections of individuals.
That's correct.
And individuals, you know, if you can understand the individual, you can understand the society, because societies act the same way as individuals.
That's exactly right.
It's true. It's true for companies. It's true for countries. It's true for where we are now. Hey, let's go to our live audience, gang. We've been doing some pre-submitted questions. I'm going to go to our live audience, and Sandra K. Reynolds asked the question: how do you address and work with people who refuse to make necessary pivots during this time? Simon?
Again, when we say refuse, right? We don't know where they're coming from. Especially in a time like this, in a time of crisis, trauma affects people in different ways. Some people go into go mode, mission mode. They're actually kind of enjoying it, because it's just go. And some people shut down, and there's no right or wrong. And the thing that we have to remember is there's no such thing as compartmentalizing. There's no such thing as compartmentalizing your feelings. Everyone will have to deal with the trauma at some point. And I've been issuing this warning. I've been calling friends in the military. When COVID started, I called a bunch of friends and said, hey, how do I compartmentalize my emotions so I can stay focused in go mode? Because you guys compartmentalize your emotions all the time when you're in mission mode, right? And my friend said to me, he gave me a warning. He said, do not think you can do that. He said, you can do it for a short period of time. Like when we're in a combat situation, sure. Yes, it's compartmentalized, but the pain comes later. The pain comes when everything stops. He says, we have huge problems with folks coming back from combat, sometimes 2-3 months after they've been home. All of a sudden, the trauma flies in. This is where we see PTS. And you see increases in domestic violence, in depression, in alcohol abuse, worst case, self-harm, anger, people on hair trigger. And so no one is going to get off this scot-free. We're all going to have to deal with the trauma at some point. So if you've been in mission mode and you've been in go mode, it's coming. It's coming when it stops. Think about the doctors and nurses on the front line, right? We've been calling them heroes and clapping them to work every day. That ends at some point, and they just go back to being doctors and nurses. And the trauma is going to flood in. But the same goes for us. And so if somebody refuses to pivot, go and sit down with them and understand where maybe they're dealing with the trauma right now. Maybe they don't know how to act. Maybe they're operating out of extreme fear because they don't know what the future is. This is one of the advantages of learning to embrace an infinite mindset. An infinite mindset sees change or uncertainty as opportunity, embracing opportunity, love surprises. Finite mindset hates surprises. That's why there's planning, because I want to make sure that I'm prepared for every eventuality so that there's no surprises. Unfortunately, there's going to be surprises. The finite mindset sees all the creativity that happened in the past. This is what James Carse explains. Whereas the infinite mindset sees all the creativity happens at the moment of change. Okay, what are we going to do? This is where the fun begins. As opposed to looking past and say, what can we rely on? We say, how can we reinvent? But that's just one of the little advantages. But if somebody refuses, I would say start with empathy. And if they really still can't, then just leave them be. They'll come in their own time. Maybe they won't come at all. But we don't want to criticize and we don't want to lean heavy into them because we do not know. We do not know. And next time that could be us.
No, and you know what, Simon, what you said is so right on. The other thing is very true is, assumption is the mother of all leadership mess ups. And the very fact that they refuse to pivot, my first question would be, how do you know that? Now, what you see is visually that they're maybe not moving as quickly and turning as fast, but you've got to go sit down with them and ask the questions. You have to find out where they are again and find out the setting, because what I've discovered so many times is what I assume by someone's behavior is based on their actions, but I've never spent time to find out what their intentions are and what their motives are. And a lot of times the very fact of connecting, finding, empathizing, many times this opens up. If they're refusing with an outward action, many times once you have a heart connection with them and you both have an understanding, all of a sudden you just remove that clog and they can move on. Again, it's the leader's responsibility to go where the people are, not the people's responsibility to go where the leader are. And I think that's one of the big misses we have in leadership, Simon.
You got it so right. And by the way, I went through this and I got it wrong on my own team and my own pivot at the beginning of COVID, which is we're making this pivot. I'm in mission mode. I'm in go mode. I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. And one of the senior members of my team just kept referring to the past and couldn't get out of her own way. And every phone call felt like I was taking 2 steps back. And I got so frustrated, and I'd call her up after the call and be like, come on, you got to pick it up. Like, we're trying to do this. Like, I need you, and it just kept not working. And I kept getting frustrated, and she got frustrated with me, and she got frustrated. And then I took a deep breath and said, I think she's just scared or uncertain. I don't know what it is. So I called her up and said, A, I'm sorry. And B, I thanked her for being in the struggle, because I know she was trying. I know that she was trying. And I thanked her for being in the struggle. And I told her that I'll be there with her through the struggle. Immediately, everything changed.
Yeah.
Because it no longer became adversarial. And I had more empathy for the fact that she wasn't in excitement go mode with me. And I couldn't use how I felt to judge her performance. It was grossly unfair. But the minute I thanked her for she didn't quit, she didn't shut down, she didn't run away, she jumped in with me. It was a struggle. And when I just thanked her for being in the thick of it, it was amazing what changed. It was amazing what changed.
Great example, Simon. Great example.
Yeah, and John, I'm going to go to Garrett, our next question. But it's funny that you say that, because this past weekend I spoke to 2 of our African-American executives and just said, talk to me. Just let me hear you and help me give me some verbiage, give me some context. John, you did that on Monday. You pivoted your whole program and said, I've got to speak to where we are now. And I think great leaders that do that get that connection, Simon, that you're just talking about. And that connection is what's going to carry us through, because we do need all of us and what we bring to the table to be able to get through some of these times. In fact, that is Garrett Vita's question. He's from Los Angeles. Catch where he's from and what he's seeing every night in Los Angeles. Here's his question. What are some action steps we should take now due to the complications of what's currently happening? Obviously, he's talking about in our cities and our streets. Simon.
So I can only respond with what I'm doing. I don't think there's an answer. I'm trying to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. I'm calling friends. I'm calling my black friends. I'm calling my white friends. I'm having uncomfortable conversations, and I'm asking them for advice, and I'm asking them how they feel, and I'm learning. And if somebody feels guilt, then it probably means because you can relate to what's going on. If somebody feels, if there's somebody who's white who's feeling guilty about something, it's probably because you recognize that there's white privilege and you know it. And that's okay. The important thing is to sit with these emotions and to express these emotions. And I'm having uncomfortable conversations and I'm having comforting conversations. But I think that's what we have to do. I think this is like we have to go through this collective therapy. And we have to do it with the people we know and the people we love. I think we have to start really close to home. I had a conversation the other day with some business leaders, and they're asking me questions about what public statements they should make. And they've made these public statements. They put out these statements, and I'm like, well, have you actually gone and sat down and talked to your team and let everybody just say how they feel? They said no. I said, well, why don't you start internally and not worry about what the legally approved public statement is? Like start talking inside. That's way more important right now. Check in with people. I said, have you called all of your black employees and just said, hey, how are you? Have you put 10, 15 people around a table, around a Zoom room? Have you had a team call and just said, hey, this is a safe space. Let's just go. Anybody want to say how they feel? And by the way, whether you like it or not, the leaders have to lead by example. We did a team call where we just went around the room and said, anybody who have anything on their mind, but I started. And it has to be genuine and heartfelt. It can't just be like, this is a safe space, tell us what you think. Leaders got to put it all out there. And all the discomfort, warts and all, so that people know that they can do that without judgment. But I think this is what we've done. I think, we live in a society that has over-indexed on machismo. We live in a society that is over-indexed on individuality, rugged individualism. John, you and I have joked about this before. We have an entire section in the bookshop called self-help. We have no section in the bookshop called help others. We've over-indexed on individual performance and individual wealth, and yet the collective and service, we've just kind of forgotten over the past 30, 40 years. Just to put it into perspective, during World War II, there were more cases of young men committing suicide who didn't get drafted. Think about that for a second. The shame of not being called to service was more traumatic than being called to service. And, service used to be normal. Like chivalry used to be the normal way of doing business, that your word was your bond and that you could go to war if you violated values. Service used to be a normal thing. Now we talk about it like you're lucky to get it in companies. Handshake deals used to be like a real thing. And I think as a society, we've forgotten what it means to do things for others. And by the way, service is a very specific definition. It means sacrificing your interests for the good of another human being's life. Sacrificing your interest, you cannot have service without sacrifice. And it doesn't have to be your life. It could be time. It can be energy. It could be money. It could be your attention. Think about how your kids feel when you actually turn to them and talk to them and look at them versus talking to them while you're on your phone. That's an act of service. Putting this away, sacrificing that I'll have to just have more emails and work later because I'm going to put this away. That's the sacrifice I'm going to make for my child or for my spouse. And I think we've forgotten about service. Service is not giving a donation. That's not service. The only time money becomes of service is if you give more money than you have to give. Then it's a service. But if you give, $100 and you make $200,000 a year, it's nice. It's a nice gesture. Keep doing it. It's not service. Service has to come with sacrifice. And I think that's what we're learning right now.
You know, Simon, you just defined service wonderfully for all of us. But you defined service for us, but you showed us humility. And really, Simon, we're over our heads. And a crisis ought to bring humility to all of us. We don't have answers. And the only way that we're going to get the answers is by humbling ourselves and going to other people and having uncomfortable conversations. I don't mind the uncomfortable conversations. I just like what happened. I don't like what happens when you have an uncomfortable conversation and you still feel uncomfortable after it because you haven't done what you need to do to begin to change and begin to understand things from their perspective or their point of view. But I think, probably my proudest time to be American was right after 9/11 for about 3 months. There was such a sense of humility. I mean, politicians just started reaching across the aisle and started truly kind of maybe putting the people first. That's what a novel thought for a politician. But I mean, the people were very humbled because we didn't have answers, and we don't have answers today either. And there's no room for arrogance in leadership, and there's no room for personal rights in leadership. I think that when you are calling your friends and having uncomfortable conversations, what you're basically saying is, I have to be uncomfortable and humble myself so that I can come, first of all, to grips with me. It's not how do I fix society, it's how do I fix me. The good news is once I kind of get fairly fixed, I can go help some other people because you only can give what you have. And so I think you described service great for us, Simon, but I think you modeled with your phone conversations example, humility, which all of us need to exhibit at this time.
Hey, I want to
thank you, John. I think you give me too much credit, but I can tell you because I've done it uncomfortably a number of times and I've got it wrong a bunch of times, that there's an easier way. There's a simple way. It's not easy. It's simple. There's a simple way to start these conversations, which is to pick up the phone and the first words out of your mouth are, "I need help."
Yeah.
Or I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what to do, which is why I'm calling you.
Which they become an ally immediately to you.
Or my thoughts are conflicting and I need to talk them out. Please, that's how my conversations all started.
Right on, friend. Right on.
I'd like to close with 2 quick questions and then some closing comments, perhaps from the both of you. Al from New York, going to the other side of the United States. Al from New York says, can there be or will there be another Lincoln, Kennedy, or Dr. Martin Luther King who will emerge and help us out of these times?
I keep holding out hope. What we have to remember that what these great leaders do, there was plenty of civil rights abuses prior to Dr. Martin Luther King for decades and decades. What Dr. King did was he took all of that frustration. He took what people were railing against and he made it stand for something. And he talked and he painted a vision of the future, a positive vision of the future. Instead of talking about the dream was not a discussion of the broken past. The dream was a discussion of the affirmative future. I have a dream that one day little black children will play on the playground with little white children. And it's the world we want to build. And we make this mistake all the time. You see it a lot in charitable works. They show you the picture of the child with the distended belly, to get you to give to hunger. They show you the person on the hospital bed or the abused animal to get you to give. But they don't show you the healthy animal or the person who survived cancer or the person who used to be hungry, to show us what your money goes towards. And I think we need leaders to tell us where we're going. Not just we want to stand for something. Nobody wants to break things. We want to build things. I joke even like with unemployment numbers. It's like, well, unemployment is down to 8%. Well, who wants to move something down? I want to get unemployment close to 100%. I want to say unemployment is up to 96%. Let's get it higher. I want to build. I don't want to break. I don't want to destroy or bring down. And that's what the leaders that he mentions, that, you know, they all presented what we can join, where we're going. Yeah.
There will be another Martin Luther King. I promise you there will be, because the problem with the crisis that we're in is we always think it's the greatest crisis that's ever happened. And that's not true. And in fact, I was talking the other day, Simon, about the fact that we even look at these times and say, this may be the most troubling time in America. I can tell you, go back to the 1960s, and Malcolm X and JFK were assassinated 2 years apart. Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated 2 months apart. You know, riots in the street, the cities were burning. You know, Vietnam War, morale was an all-time low. And I think the tendency is for us to look at our crisis and say, well, this has got to be the worst and the darkest days we've ever had in humanity. I don't believe that, but here's what I do believe. I believe that it's an impossibility to have a crisis without the emergence of great leadership. Because that's where they are revealed, and that's where they began to get their stride, their leadership stride. I think many of those. I think Abraham Lincoln is just an average person and a lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, until a crisis called the greatness out of him, and all of a sudden people were surprised. And I think that's the other thing. I think we get surprised by sometimes the person that does step up. And I'm very much positive that the bad times rise up with great leaders. I just think that they will.
Yeah.
Hey, well, I would love, so maybe to close out your thoughts, and then again, I do want to give some people ways to stay connected with you, Simon, and a couple of things, John, for you. But Tony from Seattle asked a question that maybe this can kind of be the way you guys give us some closing thoughts. And I resonate with this. I'm trying to lead this. We've got a very diverse group, thousands of coaches in nations around the world. A high percentage of women, a high percentage of African American, and everything else as well as far as diversity. So 2020 has been a tough year. I'm leading through some of the toughest times, at least I've ever seen. What do you guys think is the way forward for leaders who are facing some of the toughest challenges they've ever faced?
I face them. I wish I had a good answer. You know, I get a kick out of the fact that people keep talking about, you know, in these uncertain times. Well, all times are uncertain. There's never been a time that wasn't uncertain, ever. During these it's just because something happened that was so shocking that the uncertainty of every single day was revealed to you. But by the way, it's always been that way. And so I think the way and John, you sort of touched upon this, which is, you know, this is the most difficult time. Is like COVID is the worst thing that's ever happened. Well, you know, if we lived longer than 70 or 80 years, like if you lived 1,000 years, if that was an average human life, this would be like the 6th or 7th pandemic.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
And it's like, what do you do during hurricane season? Hurricanes are awful. They cause economic damage. They cause loss of life. They're horribly upsetting. They're unpredictable. What are you doing during a hurricane season? Well, we know what to expect. We know it's bad. We try and mitigate the damage, and we batten down the hatches, and we know what to do. You deal with it. You confront it. And I think whatever the crisis is, you have to have a sense that this could have happened all the time. And the problem is we pretend like we're actuaries. You know, the housing crisis of 2008, the actuaries had predicted there's only like a 1% or 2% chance that the whole housing market would collapse at the same time. They predicted that there was a percentage, though small. So you know what everybody did? Nothing. They didn't bother preparing because there was only a 2% chance. So why bother having a plan? Then it happened and panic ensued. By the way, does anybody think their house is going to burn down? Nope. Then how can we all have insurance? Just because it might. And that's what it is to have an infinite mindset. It's kind of like living your life with insurance. So the reason you act in service, the reason you build good teams. Now, I remember I was speaking to a company once, and one of the leaders, I was talking about leadership, and one of the guys raised his hand and he said, this is all very interesting, but you have to understand, I don't have time for this. He said, you don't understand, this is war. Well, first I had to correct him that this was not war, that no one was going to die, and the worst thing that will happen is he will lose a big company a little bit of money. Like, this is not war. So once we got that out of the way, I said, I appreciate that you don't have time for this leadership during these very difficult, challenging times. My question to you is, what were you doing during the good times? Because that's when you should be building trust. You don't build trust in the middle of the crisis. You should be building trust all the time so that when the crisis happens, the team already loves and trusts and will go to bat together. The military, you don't build trust in wartime. It's all of the training, the peacetime, that you're building the camaraderie, you're building the trust, so that when you go to war and command and control is necessary, that people are following orders knowing that their commanders are not putting them in harm's way needlessly, because the trust was built, not is building. And so I think the best thing we can do when we get through this crisis is to be fantastic leaders, to learn to listen, to learn empathy, to become students of leadership, so that we build amazing organizations, so that when the next crisis happens, we'll hit it head on together. We will meet it head on together, because that's the only way to meet crises, is as a group.
Simon, that's such good stuff you've given us. I just want to top it off very quickly with just two quick thoughts. Values and perspective. Values, that's what anchors us. That's the foundation you talked of in your very first question, Simon. It's what we stand on. And perspective is, in a crisis, people begin to see the negative. But a leader always sees more than others see, and they see before they see, and they have a perspective. And I think all the leaders that were mentioned in that question, if you look back at it, they were people of values, and they knew who they were, and they were not shaken by the times, and so they had a foundation, but they had that perspective that was able to give people hope. And it was able for them they were able to find answers, because they were able to, it's the peak to peak principle. Make your decisions on top of the mountain, not in the valley. You can see so much more. And so those are two, I think, great words to kind of help us understand what the kind of leader that's needed, values and perspective. So anyway, go ahead, Mark.
Hey, well, gang, I know you've enjoyed this last hour as much as I have. I hope not only will you listen in again, I hope you will share it. I hope you'll get John and Simon's message for the world out there. Simon, I want to give them two ways that they can stay connected with you. And the first one I'm personally excited about, because in Birmingham, Alabama, me and you and John, we're doing a Maxwell leadership podcast. And John and I looked at you and said, Simon, what are you doing about the podcast? You said, I'm not doing anything. And we kind of figuratively slapped you on the butt and said, Simon, get in the game, dude. Everybody needs to hear about you. And you've done it. You've done it. And so Simon has a podcast now called A Bit of Optimism. And if you have not subscribed, you are behind the game. You need to subscribe to this. And so you can go to simonsinek.com/podcast, and you need to register for that. Simon, thank you. Seriously, authentically, thank you for getting in the game. John and I welcome you in, and we're glad that you're here.
Thanks for kicking me in the butt. Thanks for kicking me in the butt to do it.
We all need that.
Hey, secondly, Simon, you've got some online learnings that I want people to get access to. Will you tell us a little bit about that and how to get there?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's the pivot that I talked about at the beginning, which is we can no longer do live anything. And so we still had all these wonderful people. And I reached out to people who I literally reached out to and said, hey, how are you dealing with this? By the way, you're teaching me good stuff. Can you teach it to other people too? And so we put together these classes, and it was really important. Even though lots of people are doing the whole online learning thing, it was really important to us that we maintain the human connection. All of our classes are live. It's a real classroom with real human interaction. That was really important to us. And we've been trying really hard to present classwork that builds on everything John and I have been talking about today, and meets people where they are right now. Really proud of it. So, and there's a lot of really good stuff there. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to share it.
Do they go to simonsinek.com?
Yeah. Just go to simonsinek.com, and there's all kinds of buttons that say live classes.
Beautiful.
And we have one class that I'm really proud of called Jumpstart Your Why, because we know in this time, a lot of people really want to connect with their why, especially if they've been furloughed or lost their job. And so we have the Jumpstart Your Why class as pay what you can. We don't know what people's resources are available right now, and so we're letting people pay what they can. And I'm really proud of that.
That's very good.
Your team was telling us about that. I love that idea. Hey, so go to SimonSinek.com. You'll be able to get some of this online learning. He's got it there, really sensitive to what's happening in today's world. Also, subscribe to the podcast. Prove John and I right that Simon should be in the podcast game. And then John has challenged us with his leadership content, because there's such a need from a leadership mindset to create a micro learning. You can get a small bite-sized learning of John's content, Leadership, at johnmaxwell.com. Leadership, it'll help you. Finally, John, I'm excited to tell you that the Leader series that we're doing right now, it continues. Next week on this series, June the 15th, Casey Crawford, the CEO, founder of Movement Mortgage, is going to be with us. Now, Simon, I'll tell you offline about Casey. Brilliant leader, growing now. What he's doing in his community is unbelievable. He's in an infinite game, and he and you need to change the world together. But gang, June the 15th, Simon Sinek, thank you. John, any last words and any appreciation to Simon?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. Thanks, Simon. And you also need to get his book, The Infinite Game. Mark didn't emphasize it like he needed to. He just skipped right over my suggestion. So I'm telling you, you need to get The Infinite Game. And since Mark, you and I are helping Simon all the time get podcasts going and other things, let's connect him with Casey Crawford, because I'm telling you, the moment you meet this man and see what he's doing for his community, he's built a business. He's built a huge business based on the fact of adding value to people and improving their lives. The guy really has his values together. So here we are, Mark, just helping Simon all the time. Just, finding out where this wandering.
You guys are amazing.
Bringing him home.
Thank you.
Hey, Simon.
The feeling of I love you, John. Thank you for having me on here. Thank you for giving me a platform to share my ideas. I learn every time I interact with you. I'm just a little bit wiser. I learn something every time. Just such a joy. I really love you. Thank you so much.
Love you too, my friend. You're very special. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thanks, guys.